In this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the differences in the main species of black bass that we target. So largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, and spotted bass. Now there are some subspecies and there's some other different species of black bass. I mean, I think you can think of Guadalupe bass, shoal bass. I've actually never even caught any of those. So I'm really gonna stick to kind of the three main species and how you can kind of target these fish doing different things technique-wise and how to look for them. So anyways, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. Right now, I am running a lot of sales for the month of December. So we have just about a week left in these sales. A lot of things are 20% off. A few items are even 30% off. Also, anyone who buys something right now in the month of December is going to be automatically put into a contest to win one of 4 different prizes. I'm giving away 2 one-of-a-kind bass hats, which is the hat that I'm wearing right here with the wooden bass badge. I'm also giving away an ARC Tharp Series grinder rod. To me, this is one of my favorite crankbait rods that I own. Also an ARC Gravity 7 bait cast reel. This is my favorite bait caster. I think it's a very high quality reel. So anyways, I'm gonna leave some links down below in the description. Shopping at Fin Fishing is truly the best way to help support this channel. I greatly appreciate all of you who have done so. All right, let's talk a little bit about these different species. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is that you do have lakes across the country where there's only one species of bass in your lake. You have lakes where there's 2 species, and you have lakes where there's all 3 species. Now, the one thing that I have found over the years that rings true, no matter what body of water that you go to, is that if you have multiple different species of bass in a lake, and you go to that lake and you find an area or you find a spot where you're catching different kinds of bass, like, man, you catch a largemouth one cast, you catch a smallmouth one cast, you catch a spotted bass, those are typically the best areas in the lake. Like, no matter where I've gone to places up in New York where, you know, you're catching smallmouth and largemouth back to back. Those are always some of the winningest areas that always tend to have the best quality fish in a lake. And I've seen that everywhere. I've seen that in a lot of different places. So if you find those areas on a lake where you're catching multiple species and sometimes species outside of bass, you know, catching walleye or saugeye, the biggest thing that typically signifies is that there's a lot of the right habitat and bait in an area. So there's whatever the bass really truly desire on that particular lake is present in that area. And so there's a lot of fish of all different species there. And so just know that kind of as we go through this particular subject matter, as we go through kind of the different species. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is largemouth, because largemouth are probably, well, they have to be the most prevalent of all the species. I mean, they're found in Florida, New York, Maine, all the way out to California. I believe that they are in all 50, well, I know that they're in 49 states, and I know that some people try to transplant them into Alaska, and there was one found dead at one point in Alaska. And so anyways, there's a ton of largemouth across the country. Now, there are actually different species of largemouth. You have a Florida strain, you have a northern strain, and then you kind of have the intermixed, the hybrid bass. And they do all act a little bit differently. The Florida strain bass tend to grow very large and very fast, but they do not like changing conditions. You know, if you have major cold fronts, you know, most Florida bass are found in Florida. And if you have cold front conditions, they really shut down. Now, you also have northern bass. Northern bass do not typically grow as big. They tend to be more aggressive, and a lot of conditions don't impact them as much. Now, the hybrid between them is the one that it's common, it's very common fish, and it's probably like the best of the species. Like, it has a little bit of attributes of both species. In a pure H1 hybrid, which is a mix of 50% northern and 50% Florida, is the ones that grow the biggest and are the most aggressive. These are the ones that have been like world records over the years. And so anyways, with all that being said, when it comes to a largemouth bass, the biggest thing that I can think about that kind of separates them from other species is that they tend to be a little bit lazy when it comes to a lot of things. Largemouth tend to really love cover. They tend to really love cover. They tend to love to be in and around cover. They tend to be more of what I would call ambush feeders. So they are really trying to take advantage of their surroundings and be able to feed in that way. Now, with that being said, if a largemouth was on a lake that had all kind of your main types of cover, we'll call it wood, rock, and grass, which to me are like the main types of cover in any given lake, they tend to like grass the most. So if a bass had a largemouth had an equal opportunity to be in all those areas, it seems like they tend to like grass the most. And so I'm not by any means saying that you can't catch fish on a rock pile on a grass lake or in a brush pile on a grass lake. It just seems like a good portion of those fish are going to be located in and around vegetation. They really, really like grass. And so just remember that when you get to lakes out there that have a mixture of cover and you're trying to maybe target largemouth, one thing that you can do, look for the grass. Look for those areas that have grass vegetation, whatever that lake provides. Now, what we found over the years with largemouth and really all species of bass is that you definitely have a population of bass, and this goes for all three species, that will suspend a lot of their life. And so to me, I really like to relate this to people. There are people that are just homebodies that want to stay home, and then there's people that like to travel and they like to go out and about, and that really holds true for bass. There are a lot of bass, especially largemouth, that are homebodies. They're going to kind of have a home range. This is something that has been scientifically proven time and time again. But you definitely have largemouth in certain places of the country that are going to go out and suspend. They are bait chasers. So it's always important to remember that. Now, with that being said, I think when it comes to both spotted bass and smallmouth bass, you tend to have more of them, a little bit larger percentage, that actually like to go out and chase bait throughout the year. They tend to suspend a little bit more throughout the year, really kind of coming up at certain times of the year to either feed or to spawn. Now, I want to talk a little bit about smallmouth now, because smallmouth are, as most people know, are a little bit more aggressive when it comes to like kind of largemouth versus smallmouth. You know, you tend to catch them on faster moving lures a lot of times. They tend to be a little bit more aggressive, like brighter colors. Now, they're not, to me, I have found that they are not as aggressive as spotted bass, and we'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about spots. But smallmouth can really also kind of be separated into almost two different species. Now, I believe that this is not scientifically proven, but a lot of guys out there will tell you that there is a big difference between a northern strain smallmouth and a southern smallmouth. You know, there's a lot of smallmouth in states like Alabama, Tennessee, that act vastly different than like northern smallmouth. You know, northern smallmouth love the sun. Like that, everyone knows that northern smallmouth love the sun, and it really positions those fish and makes them eat extremely well. And so it could be a mixture of a number of things. You know, typically northern smallmouth, to me, in most bodies of water up in the north tend to be clearer. You know, in your Michigans, your Minnesotas, you know, your New Yorks of the world, anything upwards in the northern part of the country, you tend to have clearer bodies of water. And so that, to me, this is what I believe is the biggest separator between smallmouth that live in the north and southern smallmouth. Like I said, smallmouth that live in Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky even. You know, those fish, because they live in clear water, I think that they like the sun so much because they are more of a visual eater. They tend to use their eyes a lot more to hunt. So there are days out there where it is sunny and you might have a light chop on the water, and I'm telling you, those are phenomenal days to go out there and catch smallmouth. They will come from a mile to hit your bait. Not really a mile, but they will come from a long ways to hit your bait on a sunny day. And so sometimes I think that southern anglers, when they go up north and maybe you have a cloudy day, you kind of start thinking, oh man, like, you know, because a lot of times in the South, when you have cloudy days and you're relating a little bit more to largemouth, these are days where bass typically hit faster moving horizontal lures a lot of times. And when you take that southern angler and you go up north and you have that same type of day, a cloudy day, you think you're gonna smash smallmouth on top waters and jerk baits. And I'm telling you what, I'm not saying that there's not days that are exceptions. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it seems like those days when you have cloudy days up in the north aren't typically the best days for smallmouth. And as a matter of fact, I have found that most days when you have cloudy days in the north and you're fishing for smallmouth, you actually want to fish something that's on the bottom. You want to fish Ned rigs and drop shots on those days. Where it seems like sunny days is where you want to throw your top waters and your jerk baits or even rip a spinner bait, you know. And so there's a major difference to me in northern smallmouth and southern smallmouth. Now, southern smallmouth tend to live in areas there where the water clarity is a little bit different, where the water clarity is just a little bit lower. And also they live in a lot of lakes that are reservoirs. And a lot of these reservoirs in the South have current, and they have dams that generate current. And so these fish tend to love to position around current, and they also tend to act a little bit more like largemouth, where you can have cloudier days in the South fishing for smallmouth, and they really like that. They kind of tend to act a little bit more like largemouth in that sense. So that's one of the biggest difference between northern and southern smallmouth. Now, like I said, all smallmouth tend to be a little bit more aggressive. So a lot of times you can go out there and catch them on a lot of different baits. But one of the biggest differences between a largemouth and a smallmouth is I think that a smallmouth, it's not, there's no other way for me to put it, but I feel like they're a little bit more smart. They learn a little bit faster. They know when something is different. Where largemouth may get fooled by the same lure often, a smallmouth tends to maybe because of how well they can see a bait or whatever it is, you will see a lot of times where smallmouth will come up at a bait and they just go right back down. Like they just really will give you a lot of fits at times. And it's really, really annoying, as a matter of fact. But that is something that like we love to chase about smallmouth. Smallmouth, in my opinion, everyone says that they fight harder than largemouth, and I don't necessarily believe that, but they definitely fight longer than smallmouth. Like if you put a 3-pound smallmouth here and a 3-pound largemouth, a largemouth has a bigger, like more broad tail, and so I feel like it can generate a lot of power, but that smallmouth is just sitting there like this. And when smallmouth get close to the boat, they do this stupid thing that I hate so much, where they just, bam, they keep digging. And they come up and you think you're about to get them and bam, they keep digging. And they will do that like until they are dead. Like legitimately, they will die. Where a largemouth will kind of lay over on its side once it's like I said, they're a little bit lazier. Like they'll fight so hard and then they're like, whatever, I'm done, I'm giving up, I'm coming to the boat. And so anyways, those are some of the big differences between largemouth and smallmouth. One more thing about smallmouth is that, like I talked about with largemouth loving grass, I think that if you have the 3 main cover types, rock, brush piles, and grass, in a lake, I believe that a lot of smallmouth tend to like rock. You really, really find that they love rock. And even some of the best places where I've caught like smallmouth around grass, it's because there is rock in the area. It's not necessarily that they're just on a random grass line. Now, I'm not saying by any means that you won't catch fish around smallmouth around grass, because you absolutely will. But it seems like rock is where they thrive, where they really, really like to be. So let's talk about spotted bass now. Because the interesting thing about spots is that there's different subspecies of spotted bass. You know, you have like a Kentucky spot, you have an Alabama spot. And so there's different subspecies, and I definitely know less about spotted bass than I feel like I do with largemouth and smallmouth. I don't fish for them near as much here where I'm located in Ohio, but I've been to a lot of fisheries. You know, your Alabama fisheries, your Carolina fisheries, a few fisheries up here in the north that have spotted bass in them. And the one thing that to me holds true no matter where you go in the country is spots are uber aggressive. You have largemouth, which are a little bit lazy. smallmouth, which are aggressive, and then you have spots. Spots are like way more aggressive than the other species, in my opinion. And as a matter of fact, you've actually seen in a lot of fisheries where spotted bass are introduced that they take over, that they will outproduce, they will outfeed the other species, and they will really take over a body of water. And that's because of their just aggressive nature. They are extremely aggressive. And so something that's really nice about having spots that are aggressive, especially when you are a guy who likes to use electronics, is that they can be an easier species to catch. Like a lot of species that you can find at times, sometimes you can find them and sometimes you can catch them. Like you can go out there and you can find different schools. Like, how do I put this? If you went out and you found 10 schools of largemouth, 10 schools of smallmouth, and 10 schools of spotted bass, I think the largemouth, you would catch like a fish, like 6 out of 10 of them. I think the smallmouth, you would catch bass like 4 out of 10 of them. Even though they're more aggressive, I think that they're a little bit smarter. And then the spotted bass schools, I think you would catch 10 out of 10. Like every school of spots that you catch, you will catch one, because they are just uber aggressive when it comes to fishing. And so with that being said, I also think that spots will act like smallmouth sometimes and spots will act like largemouth. Well, you will have spots that get inside cover at times and kind of be bluegill eating spots or cover oriented spots. And then you have spots that are way out in the middle of the lake and they roam a lot. You know, to me, spots are probably the closest to an ocean fish that we have. You have on lakes where you have a good spotted bass population, you have a lot of them that are going to suspend. A lot more of them will suspend and will be closer to the bank. And so with that being said, if you're wanting to target spots, just remember that a lot of them are going to suspend out there. Now, the one thing that I feel about spots when it comes to cover is that, again, you can catch a spot around anything or around nothing or around any type of cover. But like I said, largemouth tend to like grass, smallmouth tend to like rock, and I really think that spotted bass tend to like wood. You know, there's a lot of lakes across the country that have spotted bass in them, and you will find spots always around brush piles. You will find spots around docks, or you will find spots around random laydowns. It seems like spots really like wood. And so, like I said, I'm not saying you can't catch a largemouth around wood. I'm not saying you can't catch a smallmouth on grass, and I'm not saying you can't catch a spotted bass in rock, definitely. But it just seems like in some of these lakes, a lot of the lakes that you go to, where there's wood, docks, brush piles, standing timber, you will find a lot of spots around wood. So guys, I hope that this helps you to see that there are some differences in these species and some differences in the way that you can go about catching them. This could be like a whole, I should do like maybe a Bass Fishing HQ video that really dives deep into this because there's so much to impact. Like we talked about, even when it comes to largemouth, there's like several different species. When it comes to spots, there's species of different types of spots. So maybe I'll plan that. That'll be a big video, which could be cool. So anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you tomorrow.